the lie you've lived. They told you to be realistic, to shrink, to play it safe, to keep your head down and follow the rules. And somewhere along the way you believed them. You became the mask they offered. You memorized the lines. You forgot the script was never yours. That's the first lie, that you are small. Neville Goddard didn't say, become powerful. He said, you already are. But when you live inside someone else's expectation, you forget who wrote the laws of your reality. You begin to think that circumstances dictate identity, that failures are final, that weakness is part of your DNA. But here's the truth. You're not weak. You're hypnotized, trained to believe in limitation, conditioned to ignore your own imagination, the most divine instrument you possess. The system doesn't fear your effort. It fears your awareness. Because once you know, once you realize that you are the operant power, the game ends. You stop playing by their rules. You stop asking for permission. You stop waiting for the world to give you an identity, and you start declaring it. Neville said, change your conception of yourself and you will automatically change the world in which you live. So what's the conception you've been married to? The one that keeps whispering, you're not ready, you're not worthy, you're not enough. That's not your voice. That's your programming. And it's time to uninstall it. You were born to dominate not others, but your own state. To stand up not in defiance of the world, but in remembrance of who you were before the world told you who to be. You don't need motivation. You need a funeral for the false self. You need silence for the noise of doubt. You need truth for the lie you've been rehearsing. You don't become the giant. You uncover him. He's been there the whole time, waiting for you to stop playing small. So today, peel off the mask, burn the script, and step into the role you were cast in long before fear rewrote your part. The lie ends when the giant wakes up. And the giant is you, the sleepwalker within. You wake up. But do you? You rise, brush your teeth, go through the motions. You think you're alive, but you're not awake. You're a sleepwalker locked in a script, written by someone else, reacting, obeying, surviving. And here's the kicker. You think that's normal. Neville Goddard would say you're not living, you're remembering. But the wrong memory. You've memorized mediocrity. You've become fluent in fear. You've turned autopilot into identity. Every time you say, that's just who I am, you're quoting a Roland, a reality. The sleepwalker within doesn't question. He repeats. He stays small because the cage is familiar. But familiarity isn't freedom. Your current self is just a loop of past assumptions. And your future? Just the same loop unless you snap out of it. Neville taught us, the world is yourself pushed out. So if your life feels small, ask, what have I been assuming about me? What did you inherit beliefs about being unworthy, unwanted, unsafe? None of that is truth. That's the noise of a dream you didn't choose. But the dream can be changed the moment you stop sleepwalking. The moment you look in the mirror, not just to fix your hair, but to question your state. Who am I being today? Am I the one who creates her, the one who complains? Am I the operant power, the obedient pawn? You've got to startle the sleepwalker, interrupt the loop, break the trance. Neville said, man is all imagination, and God is man, and exists in us, and we in him. So what are you imagining on repeat? The sleepwalker imagines worst case. The giant imagines from the end. The sleepwalker waits. The giant walks as if it's already done. To wake up is violent. It destroys comfort. It dismantles lies. But it gives you back your authorship. You stop quoting the old script. You start writing your own. You begin to see the power that's always been dormant and activated. Because the giant doesn't live in your future. He lives right now under the mask, beneath the routine, waiting for the moment you stop running on memory and start moving by faith. So today, shake the sleep off, speak something bold, move differently, and remind yourself, you're not here to react. You're here to rewrite. The world convinced you that weakness was your nature, that to doubt yourself was humility, that to stay quiet was wisdom. But they lied. Neville Goddard didn't say you were created to be fragile. He said you are the operant power. the cause, not the consequence. So what happened? You rehearsed failure over and over. You told stories about why it wouldn't work, why you weren't ready, why others had the magic and you didn't. You became a lawyer for your limitations. You turned setbacks into prophecies. And now you're living in the verdict you argued for. But here's the paradox. Every time you doubted yourself, you were using power. Asterisk. Power misused, but power nonetheless. Because imagination is neutral. It doesn't care whether you use it for greatness or for grief. It obeys, and it becomes flesh. Neville said, to imagine is to risk being seen, and that's why you stayed small. Not because you're weak, but because you were afraid of being seen failing, afraid of being judged, afraid of becoming undeniable. But power has no room for apology. Power doesn't seek approval. It creates reality. You don't need more confidence. You need less compromise, less entertaining fear, less explaining your wounds, more declaring your future, more wearing the end as if it were already stitched into your skin. You were never weak. You were just loyal to a state of fear. Now switch states. Don't wait for permission. Don't audition for validation. Decide. Dwell in the version of you that never flinched, never asked, never begged. That version is waiting. And the moment you assume that version, the giant walks in. So let the world say too much. Let them call it delusion. Because while they sleepwalk through safe lives, you'll be living proof that assumption, not action, is the root of power. And that weakness was never your identity, just your old costume. You've been asking the wrong question. Can I do it? But power never asks. Power declares. Neville Goddard didn't say tiptoe into your new life. He said assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Act as if it's already done. Why? Because it is. Creation is finished. The version of you who's already living the dream exists now, not in some distant future, not when you deserve it. Right now, in imagination. That's the only place that matters. The old you was addicted to logic, to evidence, to timelines. But logic is a cage, and evidence is just yesterday's belief. Your power lives in assumption. When you move from I hope to I am, the universe bends. You stop negotiating with circumstances. You stop chasing and start embodying. Neville said, you rise to a higher level of being by assuming you are already that which you want to be. It's not fake, it's faith. And it's the fastest way to kill doubt. Because doubt needs time. Assumption lives outside of it. The giant in you doesn't ask, will this work? He says, watch me. He doesn't visualize from the outside. He lives from the inside. He doesn't seek signs. He becomes the sign. This is where your weak self dies, in the fire of conviction. This is where you burn the blueprint of your limitations and build from vision, not memory. Because you were never meant to beg the world to see you. You were meant to command reality by being it. Don't hope. Declare it. Don't wish. Embody. Don't wait. Walk. The giant doesn't need evidence. He is the evidence. They told you to find balance. But balance is not power. Balance is a cage disguised as peace. Neville Goddard didn't teach balance. He taught dominion, not over others, over self. Asterisk. Chapter 2 begins with this. You're not here to fit in. You're here to wake up. And the moment you do, your old world starts to shake, because everything you tolerated, every lie you wore like a name tag is to go. Your weak self craves approval. Your giant self creates identity. Asterisk. Your weak self waits for signs. Your giant self moves from knowing. Asterisk. This isn't about motivation. It's about metamorphosis. Asterisk. You don't tweak the old self. You bury it. You don't fix the mask. You burn it. Neville said, dare to believe in the reality of your assumption and watch the world play its part. So why are you still waiting to be chosen? You were chosen the moment you imagined. You were called the moment you desired. But you've been living like the rejected, not the redeemed. The giant in you doesn't apply, he declares. He doesn't blend. He builds. He doesn't ask, am I worthy? He says, I'm already it. Weakness whispers, wait. Power roars now. The weak version of you will always fear disruption, but the awakened version welcomes it because destruction of the old is the birth of the true. This chapter is not about tips, it's about truth. You are not on a journey to discover power. You are here to remember it. And every second you spend entertaining the old version delays the emergence of the real you. So stop managing mediocrity. Start embodying mastery. Stand in the furnace of assumption and let it burn off the version that was never yours to begin with. Power isn't something you gain. It's something you stop avoiding. And the giant in you is done waiting. You've been taught to humble yourself, to be quiet, to not ask for too much. But what they called humility was often fear in disguise. Neville Goddard didn't ask you to shrink. He asked you to assume boldly, unapologetically. So let's talk about the most dangerous habit your weak self has: settling. Settling for less than you imagined, settling for what makes sense, settling for what's safe. But there's no power in safety, and there's no greatness in logic. Your giant self doesn't play by those rules. He lives from the end. He wakes up already inside the reality he desires and walks as if the world is catching up to him. Asterisk. This isn't arrogance. This is alignment. Neville said, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not the hope, not the maybe, the feeling, asterisk. And when you feel it, you become it. That's why most people stay small. They never feel like the version of themselves who's already won. They wait for evidence. But the giant is the evidence. Your weak self builds walls of what ifs, but your awakened self builds bridges of certainty. He doesn't ask, can I have this? He says, it's already mine. He walks into rooms and owns the space not by force, but by frequency. Because once you assume, you don't explain, you don't apologize for wanting more. You don't dilute your dreams to fit their fears. You stand tall in your imagined truth and dare the world to catch up. You don't become magnetic by begging. You become magnetic by being, asterisk. And being begins in imagination. So stop negotiating with the past. Stop explaining your limits. Stand in the version of you who never had to ask, asterisk. And let that version be your only point of reference. Assume it, breathe it, walk it, until the world has no choice but to bend. Not because you fought harder, but because you remembered who you are. You've been trying to change your life by changing your actions. But action is the echo, not the source. Neville Goddard didn't say work harder. He said assume harder, because power isn't in the hustle. It's in the assumption, asterisk. When you assume correctly, your body, your world, your outcomes follow. You don't act to change your state. You act from your state. That's the shift. Your weak self is always reacting, fixing, adjusting, chasing, but your giant self is always selecting, choosing the state and dwelling in it. Neville taught that your world is yourself pushed out. So if the world is chaos, if you're surrounded by rejection, lack, and limitation, that's not the world attacking you. That's your assumption, returning home. Asterisk. Not to punish, but to wake you up. Because until you claim authorship, you live like a victim. You try to rearrange the mirror instead of changing the face. You try to push the ocean instead of becoming the tide. But the giant knows the mirror obeys the man. He knows the tide rises when he rises. So he doesn't argue with what Ishi reimagines what must be, asterisk. He doesn't try to fix broken scenes, rewrites the script. He assumes, he feels. And he walks in faith, not fact. Your weak self is obsessed with controlling outcomes. But control is a weak man's obsession. The giant embodies truth and lets reality conform. You don't need to manipulate. You need to marinate in the state of the wish fulfilled until it becomes your native tongue, until it becomes uncomfortable to doubt. So today, stop reacting. Start revealing. Step into the version of you who stopped trying and started trusting, asterisk, who stopped striving and started selecting, asterisk. The world bends not when you do more, but when you become more, asterisk. And becoming is an inside job. There's a version of you who never second guesses, never apologizes for wanting more, never shrinks to make others feel comfortable. Neville Goddard called this version your imaginal self, and it's more real than the one staring in the mirror, because the mirror lies. But imagination never does. Your reflection is delayed evidence of an old assumption. So stop living by mirrors, live by memory of who you truly are. And here's the truth. You've already been the giant in flashes, in whispers, in moments when you acted without fear, without apology. Remember that version? That wasn't a fluke. That was you, without the filter, without the guilt, without the programming. And now that version is calling you higher, not someday, but now. The weak you waits for signs. The giant you becomes the sign. The weak you fears being seen. The giant you commands attention without asking. The shift isn't complicated. It's committed. Asterisk. Neville said, the difference between feeling yourself in action and visualizing yourself in action is the difference between success and failure. You're not here to watch a new life. You're here to wear it. Feel it in your skin. Walk it in your spine. Speak it with your breath. Your world responds to the version of you that shows up most often. So if you want different results, stop tweaking behaviors. Start switching selves. Asterisk. Stop nurturing the wounded one. Start investing in the winner. Asterisk. The one who assumes he's already arrived. Not because he's arrogant, but because he finally remembers. Asterisk. You don't manifest from force. You manifest from familiarity. Asterisk. And it's time to make greatness familiar again. Because the giant isn't something you become. It's someone you return to. Asterisk. The enemy was never out there. It was always the voice in your head telling you to wait. Wait until you're ready. Wait until they approve. Wait until you're perfect. Neville Goddard didn't tell you to wait. He told you to assume. Assume now. Live now. Be now. Because that voice, the one asking for permission, is not your protector. It's your prison guard. Every time you hesitate, you teach your subconscious that fear is more important than freedom. And your subconscious obeys. It says, yes, let's play small, let's play safe, let's stay in the cage. But there's a version of you that doesn't even recognize the cage, because he was never in it. The giant version, the version that doesn't fear failure because he decides success. The version who walks into every room like the room was built for him, not from arrogance but from assumption. Asterisk. Neville said, to be conscious of being poor while praying for riches is to be rewarded with that which you are conscious of being poverty. So if you want to shift reality, don't beg, don't hustle, don't perform, just be. Be the wealth, be the confidence, be the power, not later. Now, because the only delay in manifestation is your delay in assumption. The weak you is addicted to earning it. The giant you understands you are it. Asterisk. No more trying to deserve your dream. You are the dream. And it's time the world sees that. Not through effort, but through embodiment. You don't chase change. You channel it. You don't explain why you're rising, you just rise. Because the one who assumes doesn't need to announce. His life does the talking. You keep asking for proof. Proof that it's working. Proof that you're growing. Proof that you're worthy. But the giant never asks for proof. The giant is the proof. Neville Goddard said, change your conception of yourself and you will automatically change the world in which you live. That means your world isn't waiting for you to succeed. It's waiting for you to see differently. Asterisk. To stop measuring progress by what your eyes see and start trusting what your imagination knows. because what you see is not fact. It's feedback from your old self-image. And the moment you shift your state, the feedback changes. But here's the trap. Your weak self wants constant confirmation. It wants applause, results, reassurance, and so it stays addicted to what's external, while the giant lives fully from within. He assumes in silence. He trusts without evidence. He celebrates the feeling before the manifestation, because he knows the law is real and the law cannot lie. Your weak self wants to feel secure, but true security isn't in the world. It's in the word, asterisk, your inner word, the decree you make when no one's watching, the assumption you stand in even when nothing seems to move. Neville didn't say, wait until things change, then feel different. He said, feel different and things will change. So today, stop chasing proof. Be the proof. Speak the inner word and let the outer world echo it. Because power doesn't need permission. It just needs persistence. And the giant is done waiting for signs. He is the sign. You've been trained to plan, to calculate, to map out every step. But manifestation doesn't follow maps. It follows states. Asterisk. Neville Goddard never told you to trust a process. He told you to trust your imagination. Asterisk. Because the giant doesn't walk by logic. He walks by law. Asterisk. And the law says, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not later, not when the plan aligns. Now, that's the paradox. You reach the end by starting from it. Asterisk. While your weak self is building ladders, your giant self is already standing on the roof. He doesn't need to see the staircase. He is the destination. Neville's teachings don't ask you to work toward your desire. They ask you to become the version who already has it. Feel it first, live it first, trust it first. And the world bends to that frequency. Your weak self asks, how will it happen? The giant responds, it's already done. This isn't delusion, it's decision. Asterisk, a decision to occupy the state of your desire so fully, the world forgets you were ever another version. You don't manifest with effort, you manifest with embodiment. Asterisk. That's why the giant doesn't look for next steps. He moves as if he dresses like the future, speaks like the future, breathes like the future, and suddenly everything around him starts acting like the future too. Because reality is a copycat. It mirrors your most dominant assumption, so drop the plan. Step into presence, speak the end, and let the path appear not because you forced it, but because you became it. The world will adjust. It always does when the giant wakes up. There's a version of you who never doubts the ending. He doesn't need signs. He doesn't need validation. He lives in the assumption. And that's enough. Neville Goddard taught. Faith is loyalty to the unseen reality. But the weak version of you keeps asking for proof. The giant version is the proof. He doesn't watch the weather. He is the storm. He doesn't check the mirror. He commands the reflection. This is the great reversal. The outside no longer defines the inside. The inside creates the outside. And that's the power you've been dodging. You've tried to improve the outside world without touching your inner world. But the giant knows the state is the seed, asterisk, and the harvest cannot lie. So what are you planting? Fear, doubt, delay, or faith so bold it makes the mountains move? This chapter is not about motivation. It's about memory, asterisk, the memory of who you were before fear told you to tone it down. The memory of the version who didn't ask, what if I fail? He asked, what if I never try? And he moved with no applause, no guarantee, just the deep knowing that what is felt will become asterisk. Neville never taught hope. He taught assumption, asterisk. Hope waits. Assumption walks. Hope pleads. Assumption declares. You're not here to wait for signs. You're here to become one. So burn the blueprint. Wear the crown. Not because they gave it to you, but because you remembered it was always yours. Asterisk. The giant isn't arrogant. He's awake. Asterisk. And when you wake up, the world has no choice but to shift. You've been taught to measure time, how long it takes, how far you've come, how long you must wait. But Neville Goddard didn't say wait your turn. He said assume your truth, because the giant doesn't move in time. He moves in timelessness. Asterisk. He knows that the only real clock is consciousness. Asterisk. When you become it now, it shows up now. Not always in physical form, but always in feeling first. And feeling is the signal. Feeling is the fuse. Most people wait for life to convince them they've changed. But Neville taught, persist in the assumption that you are what you want to be until that assumption has all the sensory vividness of reality. Your weak self keeps asking how much longer, but your giant self says, I already am. Because time doesn't bring the desire. Assumption does. You don't need to chase the future. You need to occupy it. Asterisk. To feel its weight in your chest, its rhythm in your breath. The moment you do, the universe reorganizes. Because reality is obedient to consciousness. It doesn't care what you hope for. It mirrors what you believe. Asterisk. And belief isn't a thought. It's a state. So choose your state like your life depends on it, because it does. You're not here to pass time. You're here to transcend it. To live the end in the now. To feel the dream before the world catches up. And when you do, the clock breaks, the rules bend, and the impossible starts knocking. Because the giant doesn't wait for time. He creates it. Most people think they're stuck because of circumstances. Neville Goddard said otherwise. He said you're only stuck in states. Asterisk. You're not broke. You're in a state of lack. Asterisk. You're not unloved. You're in a state of separation. Asterisk. You're not confused. You're in a state of forgetfulness. Asterisk. And states are not facts. They're choices. Asterisk. They feel like prisons, but they're just passing clouds. The weak self fights the weather. The giant changes the sky. He doesn't argue with old thoughts. He replaces them with new assumptions. Asterisk. Because he understands the law. Consciousness is the only reality, not your job, not your past, not your bank account. Only your assumption. Asterisk. So why are you still arguing with the old story? Why are you still waiting for proof before you shift? The giant doesn't wait for evidence. He is the evidence. He wakes up and says, this is who I am now. And the world obeys. Because states magnetize. You've already warned many. The victim, the doubter, the chaser. Now try on the giant. Try on the winner. The one who assumes he is loved, powerful, chosen. Not because he earned it, but because he decided. Asterisk. Neville taught a change of feeling is a change of destiny. So stop managing circumstances. Start mastering states. Asterisk. And when the state is firm, the facts must follow. That's not magic. That's law. And the law never fails the one who knows who they are. Asterisk. You've been taught to grind, to strive, to earn your way. But the giant doesn't earn. He embodies. Asterisk. Neville Goddard said, dare to believe in the reality of your assumption and watch the world play its part relative to its fulfillment. That means stop asking, how hard must I work? Start asking, how deeply can I dwell in the state? Because manifestation is not about effort. It's about alignment. Asterisk. You don't hustle to the top. You become the one who already lives there. The weak self begs reality to change. The giant changes selves. Asterisk. He doesn't force the outside. He inhabits the inside so completely, the outside transforms to match. This is the invisible shift. The one nobody sees but everyone feels. Asterisk. You'll walk differently, speak differently, command rooms without needing to. Not because of ego, but because you've aligned with identity. Asterisk. Neville didn't ask you to repeat affirmations until your throat goes dry. He asked you to feel it real. Asterisk. To let your body breathe as if it's already done. To taste the outcome before it arrives. To live the end so convincingly, the middle becomes irrelevant. That's not pretending. That's positioning. Asterisk. You don't need more action. You need more assumption. Asterisk. The world bends not to those who try, but to those who believe. Asterisk. And belief is not in the head, it's in the state. Asterisk. The giant knows. When you feel it, you fuse with it. And when you fuse with it, the universe has no choice but to follow. Because you're not just wishing anymore, you're wearing the wish, and that changes everything. The most dangerous belief you carry is this: I need more before I can be more. Neville Goddard shattered that lie. He said, you rise in consciousness to the level of the thing desired, and then you become that which you desire. The weak self waits for permission, more money, more time, more support. But the giant understands more is a state, not a supply. Asterisk. He doesn't collect pieces of his dream, he becomes it. He doesn't beg for breakthrough, he breathes it. And because of that, life bends not by luck, but by law. You think you're blocked because you're missing something. But the only thing missing is your decision. Asterisk. Your decision to feel it now, to wear it now, to stop waiting and start assuming. Asterisk. Every second you delay the assumption, you delay the manifestation. Not because the universe is punishing you, but because it's obeying you. You said, not yet, so it said, okay. You said, I'm not ready, so it said, I'll wait. But the moment you say, I am, the heavens lean forward. Because the I am is divine. Neville never gave you tips. He gave you a key to the kingdom of now. And now is all you need. The giant knows destiny doesn't arrive. It erupts, asterisk, from within, from state, from certainty. And when you own that, when you stand in that frequency, doors fly open, not because you knocked, but because you never needed to. You were always the one holding the lock and the power to turn it. So stop asking if you're enough. Start remembering you're everything. Asterisk, and act like it. There's a myth that still owns you. The belief that struggle is noble. You've been taught that pain earns reward, that grinding guarantees greatness. But Neville Goddard didn't teach struggle. He taught state. Asterisk. He said, it is not what you want that you attract. You attract what you believe to be true. That means your constant effort is not the source of your power. Your identity is. The weak self wears exhaustion like a badge, but the giant moves from stillness. He doesn't push, he possesses. Asterisk. He walks with calm conviction, not because he's earned it, but because he assumed it. Asterisk. This world loves hustle, but manifestation doesn't respond to hustle, it responds to assumption. Asterisk. You don't get what you chase, you get what you embody. An embodiment doesn't require burnout, it requires belief. Asterisk. When you stop worshipping work and start honoring alignment, everything changes. Not because you worked harder, but because you stood taller. Neville taught that your world reflects your self-concept. So if your life is chaos, look at your concept. Are you still proving, still performing, still pretending? Then you're not the giant yet. But the moment you remember, the moment you dwell in the state of already being it, the grind ends and the guidance begins. Not through effort, through inner echo. Asterisk. Because your dominant state is always whispering to the universe, this is who I am. And the universe always says yes. So stop worshipping the hustle. Start honoring the higher self. And watch the world rearrange to match your labor, but to match your level. Asterisk. You think you're stuck because nothing outside is changing. But Neville Goddard would tell you you're not stuck in circumstance. You're stuck in identity, asterisk. And identities aren't changed through effort. They're changed through awareness, asterisk. The weak version of you begs for change. The giant embodies it. He doesn't try to fix the outside world. He upgrades the inner world, asterisk, because he understands outer change is a byproduct, asterisk. Your job isn't to fix the reflection, it's to shift the face that's looking into the mirror. Neville's teachings are clear. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That doesn't mean visualize harder. It means feel it deeper, asterisk. It means walk like it's already true. Speak like it already happened. Rest like the war is over. Because when you rest in the end finds its way to you. The giant doesn't manipulate reality. He replaces the self that reality is responding to. You don't manifest through obsession, you manifest through embodiment, asterisk. The new self must become more real than the old past. And the only way that happens is by choosing the state again and again until it's the only one that feels like home. No one can do this for you. No one can believe it for you. This isn't group work, it's soul work. And the reward is not the thing. It's the transformation, asterisk. Because once you truly shift the self, you'll never go back to begging. You'll never again try to force reality. You'll just walk as the version who already has it, asterisk. And watch the world fall in line, because it always does. When you become the cause, the effect must follow. There's a truth so powerful, most avoided, your results don't lie. They reflect your dominant assumption, not your wishes, not your affirmations, your state, asterisk. Neville said, you must assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled until your assumption has all the sensory vividness of reality. That means stop treating your imagination like a side hobby. It's not decoration, it's creation. Your current life is a feedback loop, a perfect mirror of who you think you are. So look around. If you're surrounded by lack, you've assumed lack. If you're drowning in delay, you've assumed waiting. If you feel invisible, you've assumed unworthiness. And the giant doesn't fight the mirror. He changes the face, asterisk. He doesn't cry about the reflection. He shifts the projection, asterisk, because he knows the outside world is made of inner choices. The weak self begs for new facts. The giant becomes a new frequency, asterisk. And frequencies don't chase, they attract, asterisk. They don't perform, they emit, asterisk. When you truly shift identity, reality must bow, because you've stopped reacting and started radiating, asterisk. And that's the secret no one tells you. Reality doesn't need convincing. It just needs clarity, asterisk. Clear assumption, clear identity, clear embodiment. Not, I hope it comes, but it already did. Not, please choose me, but I've chosen myself. And that kind of clarity, it cuts through doubt. It silences fear. It reshapes reality not by force, but by frequency. And you become unshakable enough because the world got softer. But because you got stronger, asterisk, they told you to be realistic, to wait your turn, to prove your worth. But Neville Goddard whispered something different. Asterisk, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Asterisk, not when it's convenient, not when you feel worthy, but now, asterisk. Because the giant doesn't care about logic, he cares about law, asterisk. And the law says, consciousness is the only reality. You've been trying to earn your dream when you were meant to embody it. You think power comes from effort, but real power comes from embodiment, asterisk, from choosing the state before the world gives you a reason. That's the difference between the weak self and the giant. The weak self negotiates. The giant decides. Asterisk. The weak self waits for proof. The giant becomes the proof. You keep saying, when I get it, I'll feel it. But Neville flips the script. When you feel it, you'll get it. This is not a waiting game. It's a waking game. You wake up to the truth that your assumption is more real than your circumstance. And that scares the small self. Because if it's true, then nothing is holding you back except your refusal to feel differently. Asterisk. But the moment you dare to feel the end, something shifts. Not out there, but in you. Asterisk. And when it shifts in you, the world rushes to catch up, because the world is not the source. You are. Asterisk. You're the projector, the scriptwriter, the stage. So stop performing. Start possessing. Asterisk. Stop hoping. Start inhabiting, because when the inner world changes, the outer one becomes your echo. Louder, sharper, unstoppable, just like the giant you were born to be. There's a voice in your head telling you it's too late, that you missed your shot, that you're too old, too far gone, too broken to begin again. Neville Goddard would call that voice what it truly is, a lie. Asterisk. Because time is not your master. Time is your servant. Asterisk. And you don't create from time, you create from state. Asterisk. The giant doesn't ask how much time he has. He asks, what state am I in right now? Because Neville taught, asterisk, the present state determines the future. Asterisk, that means nothing you've done matters more than who you're being now. The weak self drags the past like a chain. The giant breaks it with one word. Assumption. Asterisk. He doesn't relive regret. He revises. He doesn't mourn what's lost. He imagines what's already his. Asterisk. You think you need years to change your life, but you only need a moment, one moment of pure alignment, one moment of stepping into the version of you who already has it. And from that moment, the universe reshapes itself, because it always responds not to time, not to effort, but to identity. Asterisk. You're not on a linear path, you're on a spiral of states. And every time you choose a new one, you bend reality. Asterisk. So the question isn't how long. The question is, how real are you willing to feel it? How deeply are you willing to own it? Asterisk. The giant doesn't delay his destiny. He dwells in it right now, without apology, without waiting, because he knows the secret. The future isn't coming. It's already here. Asterisk. And it's wearing the face you dare to believe in. The world taught you to set goals, to hustle, to check off boxes and hit milestones. But Neville Goddard didn't teach steps. He taught states. Asterisk. He didn't say climb the ladder. He said occupy the top. Asterisk. Because manifestation isn't a process, it's a position. Asterisk. It's not about progress, it's about possession. Asterisk. You don't inch your way to abundance, you assume it. And from that assumption, the outer world aligns. Not out of fairness, but out of law. Asterisk. Neville said, change your conception of yourself, and you will automatically change the world in which you live. But most people change their plans, not their conception. Asterisk. They chase new tactics while clinging to the same self. They grind through time, hoping it leads to transformation. But the giant knows better. He doesn't grind, he gravitates. He pulls the future into the now by living from it. That's the real goal, not achieving the thing, but becoming the one who already has it. Asterisk. You've been asking, how do I get there? But the better question is, how do I live from there? Because if you can feel it now, you'll see it soon. Asterisk. Not because the outside changed, but because you did. Asterisk. Not because the world upgraded, but because you became unrecognizable to your past. Asterisk, that's what state does. It makes the old life impossible. Asterisk, it burns the bridge to lesser versions of you. And that's why Neville didn't give you a roadmap. He gave you a mirror, asterisk, a way to see your true self and the power that's always been yours. So stop chasing goals. Start choosing identity, asterisk, and let the world race to catch up with the version of you who stopped playing small. There's a moment in your journey when you stop asking for signs. You stop begging for proof, because the giant doesn't wait for confirmation. He creates it. Asterisk. Neville Goddard taught this beautifully. Dare to believe in the reality of your assumption and watch the world play its part. This isn't blind faith. It's inner clarity. Asterisk. It's not about hoping the world changes. It's about becoming the version of you who no longer needs it to. Asterisk. You've been waiting for reality to validate your desire, but the giant validates himself. Asterisk. He doesn't ask if he's worthy. He declares he is. He doesn't ask if it's working. He knows it is because he's dwelling in the end. That's the power of living in the state of the wish fulfilled. You stop checking the mirror every 5 seconds. You stop asking, where is it? And you start walking like it's done, talking like it's finished, breathing like the battle is already won. The weak self constantly checks the scoreboard, but the giant writes the rules. Asterisk. He's not playing to win. He's playing because he already has. Asterisk. And that shift from seeker to source changes everything. Because the moment you stop needing proof, the universe starts offering it. Not to convince you, but to mirror you. Asterisk. So the next time you wonder where the result is, ask yourself, have I really moved? Not in action, but in assumption. Asterisk. Because when the assumption is real, the evidence becomes irrelevant. Asterisk. And ironically, that's when it shows up. Not because you chased it, but because you no longer needed it to believe. Asterisk. You already believed, and belief embodied is the giant's true power. You think you need more motivation. Another quote, another push, another burst of fire to get moving. But Neville Goddard would remind you, you don't need motivation, you need a new state. Asterisk. Because when you shift your state, your actions follow effortlessly. Not through willpower, but through identity alignment. Asterisk. The giant doesn't wait for energy. He embodies it. He doesn't wait to feel inspired. He is inspiration in motion. Because action is never the cause, it's the effect of a shifted self. And if you've been forcing, dragging, or exhausting yourself to make it happen, you're operating from the wrong identity. You are trying to change outcomes without changing. Origin, asterisk. Neville said, your assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. That means you can feel your way into a new reality before it exists. You can behave like the version of you who no longer needs to try, because there already are. Asterisk. That's the giant's creed, not hustling for change. He's hosting it. He becomes the frequency that creates new outcomes. And frequencies don't beg. They broadcast. Asterisk. So stop asking for motivation. Start dwelling in the end. Asterisk. Start assuming that it's already yours, and let your actions be the overflow of that knowing. Let effort be replaced by embodiment. Let grind be replaced by grace, because the most powerful version of you doesn't work harder. They exist louder. Asterisk. And the louder your state, the quieter your doubt. You don't need more proof. You just need to become the kind of person who no longer needs external permission to show up as powerful. Because deep down you already are. You just forgot. Now it's time to remember and rise. Asterisk. Most people think they need to be fixed, that something's wrong with them, that until they're perfect, they can't create the life they want. But Neville Goddard shattered that illusion. He said, you're not broken. You're unaware of the giant that lives within, unaware that creation doesn't require perfection, it requires assumption. Asterisk. The weak self waits to feel worthy. The giant declares their worth, not because of what they've done, but because of who they've dared to be. Asterisk. You were never meant to deserve your dream. You were meant to assume it, to dwell in the state of the wish fulfilled imperfect, maybe, but powerful anyway, because the power to manifest is not in your performance, it's in your position. Asterisk. And position is chosen in the mind. Neville didn't tell you to fix yourself. He told you to imagine differently. Asterisk. To revise the self-image until reality bowed to it. And that's where the weak self dies at the altar of assumption. Because when you start thinking from the end, you stop being a victim of circumstance. You stop asking, why me? And start saying, of course me. You stop shrinking to fit the world and start expanding to reshape it. Asterisk. The giant doesn't rise because he's flawless. He rises because he remembers who he is. And the moment you remember, the world remembers too. Not because it changed, but because you did. Asterisk. You stopped fixing. You started imagining. Asterisk. And that shift small in thought, massive in effect, is what separates the silent from the unstoppable. They told you to work hard, to earn your blessings, to hustle your way to happiness. But Neville Goddard offered a radical truth. You don't earn the life you want. You assume it. Asterisk. And once you do, life bends to your assumption, not your effort. The giant doesn't hustle. He inhabits. Asterisk. He doesn't fight for results. He feels from the end, because it's not about doing more, it's about being different. Asterisk. Neville said, dare to believe in the reality of your assumption. That belief, not your work ethic, is what reshapes the world around you. The weak self obsesses over to-do lists. The giant obsesses over states of being. Asterisk. Because he knows the truth. Your external grind will always reflect your internal gap. Asterisk. And when you close that gap, embodying the result, the grind becomes unnecessary. You don't need to push, you just need to become. Asterisk. That doesn't mean laziness, it means alignment. Asterisk. It means acting from identity, not for identity. You've been sweating for reality you didn't yet believe in. And that's why it kept slipping through your fingers. But when you start moving like it's already yours, you start attracting what you used to chase. You stop reaching and start receiving. Asterisk. Because the version of you who already has it, they don't hustle. They radiate. Asterisk. They walk differently, speak differently, decide differently, because they are different. And from that difference, the world makes way. So let the grind go and let the giant step forward. He's not exhausted. He's embodied. And now so are you. You've been waiting for the world to catch up, waiting for signs, waiting for change, waiting for the right time. But Neville Goddard didn't teach waiting. He taught occupying. Asterisk. The giant doesn't wait for permission. He moves as if it's done. Asterisk. Because he knows this. Reality responds to the version of you who acts like it's already real. Asterisk. Not the one who hopes, not the one who pleads, but the one who walks in the fulfillment. Asterisk. Neville said, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and let that assumption harden into fact. That's not just a nice quote, it's cosmic law. Asterisk. The weak self asks, when will it happen? The giant says, it already has. And that one shift dissolves delay. It turns time into an illusion and your current self into the gatekeeper of everything you ever wanted. You think the dream is far away? It's not. It's here. Asterisk. And the only reason you can't touch it is because you're still being someone who asterisk can't asterisk. But the moment you step into the role, the world reconfigures. Your energy shifts. People notice. Doors open. Momentum builds. Not because you did more, but because you finally became aligned asterisk. The truth is, you're not waiting on the dream. The dream's been waiting on you, asterisk. Waiting on your decision. Waiting on your embodiment. And most of all, waiting on your audacity to live it out loud. So stop watching the clock. Start setting the tempo, asterisk. Because the giant doesn't follow time, he commands it, asterisk. And the future? It belongs to those bold enough to live it now, asterisk. They told you to visualize, to dream, to imagine your best life, and you did. But nothing changed. Why? Because you didn't inhabit it, you watched it, you stood at the edge of your dream, admiring it like a painting instead of living in it like a home. But Neville Goddard wasn't talking about passive daydreaming. He was talking about dwelling, asterisk, dwelling in the end, feeling it real, breathing as the version of you who already has it. That's the giant's game. He doesn't hope. He embodies, because when you become the person who already has the thing has to show up. Asterisk is not magic, it's mechanics. Asterisk. The weak self imagines with doubt. The giant imagines with ownership. Asterisk. He doesn't wish for better. He remembers better and moves from it. Neville said, to be transformed, the whole basis of your thoughts must change. That transformation isn't external, it's existential. Asterisk. It's a shift in where you live in your mind. And most people live in the neighborhood of lack. They visit abundance, but they never move in. Asterisk. But the moment you change your address, your spiritual address of everything else forwards to the new you. Opportunities, relationships, wealth, joy, not because you chased them, but because you matched them. You didn't ask, you acted. You didn't visualize, you vibrated, asterisk, and that vibration rewrote your reality. So stop looking at the dream, start relocating to it, because where you dwell determines what you receive. And when you make your home in the end, the journey collapses. The dream stops being a destination and starts being your default, asterisk. You've been told to work on your mindset, to think positively, to repeat affirmations. But Neville Goddard went deeper. He said your state creates your reality, not just your thoughts, because thoughts without embodiment are just noise. The giant doesn't just think abundance. He feels it, lives it, moves from it. He walks into the room as if the deal is already done, because to him it is. Neville's law is simple. You are what you believe yourself to be. But belief isn't mental, it's experiential. It shows up in how you breathe, how you speak, how you hold your shoulders. It's not just, I am wealthy. It's the calm, grounded energy of someone who knows they are. The weak self tries to think their way to power. The giant inhabits it. Because states aren't ideas, they're frequencies. Asterisk. You've been trying to change your life by adjusting your thoughts. But if those thoughts aren't backed by feeling, they're empty. It's like turning the steering wheel without the engine on. Nothing moves. But when your assumption is embodied, reality can't help but respond, because it's not listening to your words. It's responding to your being. Asterisk. And the moment you shift into a new state, the game changes. Not slowly, instantly, not because of effort, but because of energetic congruence. Asterisk. So stop trying to think better. Start being different, because your state is the soil, and every harvest starts in the field of who you are. Asterisk. You keep asking how. How do we manifest faster? How do I stay consistent? How do I stop doubting? But Neville Goddard flips the question. He says, asterisk. Don't ask how, ask who, asterisk. Because when you become the person who already has it, the how becomes irrelevant. The giant doesn't obsess over mechanics. He embodies certainty. He doesn't study the path, he walks it, because in the realm of the imagination, identity drives outcome. Neville said, change your conception of yourself, and you will automatically change the world in which you live. That shift isn't about figuring it out. It's about feeling it done. Asterisk. The weak self tries to strategize every step. The giant collapses time by becoming the end. Because when you move as the version of you who already succeeded, life has no choice but to reflect it. You act differently, speak differently, decide differently, not because you're pretending, but because you're occupying asterisk. And in that occupation, struggle dissolves, clarity comes, alignment happens. Because the you who already has the life doesn't wrestle with doubt. They don't chase, they attract asterisk. They don't fear, they declare asterisk. So stop asking how, start becoming who, asterisk. Because the path to your dream isn't a mystery. It's a mirror, asterisk. And when your identity shifts, the reflection must follow. You've been waiting to feel ready, waiting to feel confident, waiting for the fear to go away before you move. But Neville Goddard shattered that lie. He said, feeling comes from assumption, not the other way around. Asterisk. The giant doesn't wait for courage. He moves as if, because courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the presence of identity. Asterisk. The weak self says, I'll act when I feel it. The giant says, I'll feel it because I act. Neville's truth is piercing. Dare to assume you are what you want to be, and you will compel everyone to play their part. Not beg, not hope. Compel. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. Asterisk. When you become the version of you who already has it, the world reorganizes. People shift. Circumstances bend. Energy recalibrates. Not because you're manipulating outcomes, but because you're transmitting certainty. Asterisk. Uncertainty doesn't need proof. It creates it. You've been looking for signs, but signs follow the signal, and the signal is your state. Asterisk. So stop waiting for confidence. Start being the cause. Asterisk. Walk like it's done. Speak like it's real. Move like you're chosen. Because the moment you act from it, you become a magnet to it. And that shift, that's where transformation lives. You've been told to fake it till you make it. But Neville Goddard said something deeper. You don't fake. You assume. Because the giant isn't pretending. He's remembering. He's stepping into the version of himself that's always existed buried beneath doubt and delay. Neville taught, your assumption, though false if persisted in, will harden into fact. That means you don't wait for evidence. You create it through embodiment. Asterisk. The weak self performs. The giant persists. Asterisk. And that persistence transforms fiction into form, not through effort, through identity. Asterisk. Because your life doesn't reflect what you want. It reflects who you're being. You want to unlock that power? Stop acting like the old self in new clothes. Start moving like the new self with old memories. The dream version of you isn't on the horizon. It's here. Asterisk. And the more you assume its posture, the faster the world bends to your frame. Your voice deepens. Your choices sharpen. Your presence expands. Not because you're forcing change, but because you've become change. The giant doesn't announce his transformation. He radiates it. And in that radiation, the old reality has no choice but to fade. So stop playing small. Stop rehearsing lack. And start embodying the inevitability of who you truly are. Asterisk. Because in the end, you don't become it. You remember it. You've been told manifestation is about thinking better thoughts. But Neville Goddard pointed higher. He said, asterisk, it's about assuming the divine authority within you. Asterisk, because you are not a beggar in the universe. You are his voice, its vessel, its activator. Neville declared, man is all imagination. God is man and exists in us and we in him. You've been praying to a God outside of you, but the giant knows God imagines through you. Asterisk. And what you accept as true becomes. Not because you earned it, but because you claimed it. The weak self begs for signs. The giant speaks them into existence. Because when you realize your imagination is God in action, every doubt becomes irrelevant. You stop asking, will this work? You start knowing, I work it. This is the divine paradox. You are both the creator and the creation. You don't need more power. You need awareness of the power already flowing through you. Because when the giant rises, he doesn't plead for miracles. He commands them. He doesn't chase light. He radiates it, and that light shifts rooms, moves hearts, bends matter. Not because he's special, but because he finally remembered who he always was. Asterisk. So stop outsourcing your authority. Stop waiting for a sign from the sky and start becoming the God in your world. Because what you dare to assume today becomes the shape of your reality tomorrow. You've been looking for proof, waiting for confirmation, hoping the universe gives you a wink before you act. But Neville Goddard said, the proof comes after the assumption. Asterisk. The giant doesn't require signs. He creates them because he understands that reality is not a reaction, it's a reflection. Asterisk. You don't get what you desire. You get what you embody. And the moment you assume it's done, the universe begins to move. Not randomly, but precisely. Neville taught, assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not wish for it, not wonder about it, but live in it. Asterisk. Because the weak self waits for evidence before believing. The giant believes and then evidence obeys. Asterisk. That's the law. It's not positive thinking. It's spiritual identity theft. You steal the feelings of your future self and live them now. And when you do, you activate timelines that would have never opened from doubt. Your words shift. Your posture changes. People respond differently. Not because you're manipulating, but because you're now broadcasting a different signal. You're not asking anymore. You're announcing, and the world listens when you speak from conviction. So stop waiting for confirmation. Be the confirmation, because proof doesn't come before the leap. It comes because of it. You've been trying to control outcomes, micromanaging the details, obsessing over how it will all unfold. But Neville Goddard reveals the deeper truth. Creation is finished. Asterisk. You're not building your dream. You're selecting it. The giant doesn't create outcomes. He chooses realities. He knows every version of him already exists, waiting to be occupied. So instead of struggling to force things, he simply aligns. Neville said, creation is finished. It is your assumption which determines the portion you experience. That means it's not about working harder. It's about accepting faster. Asterisk. Accepting that the reality you want is already real on another frequency. And the dial isn't effort, it's assumption. Asterisk. The weak self tries to push reality. The giant shifts identity. Asterisk. And the moment that identity locks in, the new world emerges. You've been trying to make it happen. But that's not manifestation. That's manipulation. Real manifestation is resonance. Asterisk. It's tuning yourself to the frequency of the life you desire. It's no longer about when or how. It's about who. Asterisk. And when you become the who, the rest collapses into now. So stop fighting the old. Start selecting the new. Because your future is not built. It's remembered. Asterisk. You've been told you need to wait for divine timing. That things happen when they're meant to. But Neville Goddard turns the table. He said, now is the appointed hour. Asterisk. The giant doesn't postpone destiny. He declares it, because time isn't the master, consciousness is. Neville taught, to desire a state is to have it. It's not about waiting for alignment. It's about becoming alignment. The weak self delays action until stars align. The giant moves and the stars rearrange. You've been hypnotized by clocks and calendars. But manifestation obeys only one thing, assumption, asterisk. Not next year, not after healing, not someday, now. Asterisk, because when you truly assume it's done, reality has no choice but to comply. The world doesn't shift on delay, it shifts on decision. And decision doesn't live in the mind, it lives in the body. Asterisk. It shows up in the way you walk, breathe, speak today. Not someday. Because the moment you say, it is done, the universe starts moving parts you can't see, not because of your effort, but because of your embodiment. Asterisk. So stop waiting for the right time. Declare, asterisk, this is my time, asterisk, and mean it. Because divine timing isn't a date, it's a decision, asterisk. You think you're waiting on the breakthrough. But Neville Goddard flips that truth. The breakthrough is waiting on you. Asterisk. You're not at the mercy of circumstances. You are the creator of them. Neville said, the world is yourself pushed out, which means everything outside is just echoing your inner state. You don't need to chase signs. You need to shift self, asterisk. Because when your identity changes, reality rushes to reflect it. The weak self looks for permission. The giant gives himself the green light. Asterisk. No more waiting for the right mood, the right moment, the right alignment. You are the alignment. You are the gatekeeper. You are the ignition switch. And when you flip that switch by, assuming the version of you who's already won everything rearranges, your relationships, your bank account, your energy, not because the world changed, but because you did, and the world always follows your lead. Neville's core message is not comfort, it's command, asterisk. He taught you to rise, not just to believe, but to assume with boldness, asterisk, to declare, not whisper, to choose your state like your life depends on it, because it does. The giant doesn't negotiate with old beliefs. He replaces them, because breakthrough doesn't happen to him. It erupts from him. So if you've been waiting, stop, become, asterisk. Because the moment you fully assume it, the breakthrough becomes inevitable. Asterisk, they told you to be realistic, to lower your expectations, to stay safe. But Neville Goddard challenged that lie with fire. He said, your assumption is more powerful than your environment. Asterisk. You've been told to adapt to reality, but the giant reshapes it. Asterisk. He doesn't shrink to fit the facts. He expands to match the vision. Neville taught, change your conception of yourself and you will automatically change the world in which you live. That means you don't respond to the world. You recast it, not through force, but through the fierce clarity of who you've decided to be. Asterisk. The weak self looks around and says, this is what I have to work with. The giant looks within and says, this is what I choose to live. Because reality isn't an authority. It's a mirror. And when you stand differently, it reflects differently. You think the world is fixed? Number. It's flexible. It bends to belief. It obeys embodiment. So stop explaining your limits. Start expressing your new self. Because manifestation isn't a maybe, it's a mandate. And the second you decide you're done playing small, the universe starts reprinting the script. Not because of effort, but because you finally walked on stage as the main character, asterisk, and the world, it adapts to the role you own. You've been trying to stay humble, trying not to ask for too much, trying to play safe with your dreams. But Neville Goddard didn't teach modesty. Had taught Majesty, he said, dare to believe in the reality of your assumption and watch the world play its part relative to its fulfillment. You don't need to shrink. You need to expand, asterisk. You don't need to settle. You need to assume, asterisk. The giant inside of you isn't here to impress others. He's here to express God, asterisk, and God doesn't whisper dreams, he declares them. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to radiate, asterisk. Neville showed you that imagination is not fantasy. It's formation, asterisk. It's the blueprint of destiny. And when you use it with authority, mountains move. Doors unlock. Reality bends. The weak self avoids standing out. The giant was born to asterisk because he knows his bigness isn't arrogance. It's alignment, asterisk. It's obedience to the calling he came here to fulfill. So stop asking, is this too much? Start asking, why not me? And then assume it's already yours. Because the world doesn't reward the polite. It responds to the decided, asterisk. And when you finally embody the bigness you've been hiding from, everything changes to match your size. You've been taught to wait for the right opportunity, to be patient, to trust the process. But Neville Goddard didn't wait, assumed, asterisk. He said, act as though it were already true. The giant doesn't wait for signs. He moves like it's done. Because waiting is a form of doubt dressed as wisdom. And wisdom without action is just well-decorated fear. Neville taught that your inner movement creates outer motion. You don't become ready by waiting. You become ready by walking in it. Asterisk. By stepping into the version of you who already lives it, breathes it, embodies it. The weak self says, I hope it happens. The giant says, it already has. That shift alone changes everything. Because it's not time that changes reality. It's decision, asterisk. And decision isn't passive, it's a posture. It's how you speak when no one is listening. It's how you dress when there's no event. It's how you show up when the world still doubts you. Not to prove anything, but to confirm what you already know, that you're no longer hoping. You're remembering, you're not trying. You're returning to the truth that was always there. So stop waiting for the world to catch up. Move and let the world rearrange around you.